stood in their place that no HOA rule, no city ordinance, and no amount of screaming could ever touch. And the woman who started it all would spend the next 3 years wishing she had never learned. The morning Callum Dresch first noticed the survey stakes had been pulled from the ground, he assumed it was neighborhood kids. That was the kind of man he was, charitable to a fault, slow to anger, quicker to excuse than to accuse. He had moved to Pinecroft Estates 2 years earlier after his divorce, carrying very little except a sensible car, a 10-year-old dog named Wick, and a quiet resolve to rebuild something that felt like home. The house on Sycamore Bend was modest, a single-story craftsman with a wraparound porch and a deep backyard that backed against a greenbelt. He had spent his first autumn planting an arborvitae hedge along the western property line. 42 saplings at $11 apiece, spaced 14 inches apart, staked and watered through a dry winter until they caught. By the second spring, they were chest-high and growing fast, a living green wall that gave him the one thing the divorce had stripped away: privacy. His neighbor to the west was a woman named Renata Collum. She introduced herself the day he moved in, appearing at his truck before he had even unloaded the first box, wearing a lanyard printed with the words Pinecroft Estates HOA, board president, and a smile that never once reached her eyes. She was 53, broad-shouldered, with the posture of someone who had practiced standing in doorways and blocking paths. She handed him a laminated packet, 17 pages of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, and told him to read it thoroughly. "We maintain standards here," she said. "We've worked very hard to maintain them." "I'll read every word," Callum said, and he meant it. He did read every word. He learned that fences above 6 feet required board approval, that satellite dishes had to face the rear, that holiday lights had to come down by January 15th, and that vegetative screening along property lines was permitted so long as it did not exceed 8 feet in height and did not encroach beyond the surveyed boundary. He planted his hedges accordingly, 3 inches inside his own line, verified by the survey markers that the previous owners had left in place. He followed the rules. He always followed the rules. Renata watched him plant every one of those trees from her kitchen window. The first letter came 6 weeks after planting. It was an official HOA notice printed on letterhead, citing Section 411 of the CC&Rs, claiming the arborvitae hedge constituted a site obstruction and requesting voluntary removal within 30 days. Callum photographed the survey stakes, measured the clearance, and wrote back a polite and precise rebuttal with 3 attached exhibits. He received no response. He considered the matter closed. The second letter came 4 months later, this time claiming the hedges created a drainage easement issue. He hired a civil engineer named Dorna Pask to inspect the site. Dorna walked the line with a transit level, confirmed there was no grade interference of any kind, and provided a signed statement to that effect. Callum sent the statement to the HOA, again with a polite cover letter. Again, no response. The third letter arrived on a Tuesday in October, and this one cited a city ordinance he had never heard of, Municipal Code 1844.090, which apparently regulated vegetative screens in residential corridors. He looked up the ordinance. It applied specifically to commercial properties. He sent a brief, courteous email pointing out the error. The reply, when it came, was from the HOA's attorney and consisted of a single paragraph. The board maintained its position and reserved all rights. He told his friend Milo Farron about it over dinner. Milo was a contractor, a big-voiced man who had known Callum since college and who had very little patience for bureaucratic theater. He listened to the whole story with his fork halfway to his mouth, then set it down. "She wants your hedges gone," Milo said. "It's got nothing to do with ordinances." "I know that," Callum said. "So what are you going to do?" "I'm going to keep following the rules," Callum said, "because I haven't broken any." That was October. By March, the hedges were 6 feet tall, thick enough to block the sightline from Renata's kitchen window to Callum's backyard, which was the only thing Callum believed she had ever wanted to see. He had watched her over the previous 18 months. He had seen the way she stood at her kitchen window every Sunday morning when he drank coffee on his porch. He had noticed the telescoping camera lens she used, nominally pointed at birds, but angled consistently at his property. He had observed the way she managed the neighborhood, cycling through Targets, the family on Laurel who painted their shutters the wrong shade of green, the retired couple on Pine Knoll who let their grass grow half an inch above the permitted length, but always returning to him with a particular intensity that felt personal in a way that had nothing to do with property standards. He did not know why he was her focus. He did not need to know. He kept his lawn at 4.5 inches. He kept his gutters clear. He kept Wick on a leash during walks and cleaned up without being asked. The survey stakes disappeared on a Thursday in late March. He noticed it Friday morning while walking Wick along the perimeter. Two of the three iron pins on the western boundary were simply gone. The small orange flags that marked them vanished. The earth around each pin location disturbed and then smoothed over, as if someone had tampered with it but tried to conceal the fact. He photographed both locations, noted the GPS coordinates on his phone, and called the county surveyor's office. They could not send someone for 3 weeks. 3 weeks later, the surveyor, a thin, methodical woman named Bev Cratchit, arrived with her equipment and re-established the pins. She handed Callum the report and pointed to a note in the margin. "These pins were physically removed," she said. "That's destruction of a survey monument. It's a misdemeanor in this state." "Do you know who did it?" Callum asked. "I know someone used a pry bar," she said. "I can't tell you more than that." He filed a report with the county. He sent a copy to the HOA board. He sent a copy to Renata directly, with a polite note stating that he was making everyone aware of the situation. He received no response from any of them. That was the last week of April. The chainsaw happened on a Monday morning in May. Callum was inside making breakfast when Wick began barking, a low, urgent bark that the dog reserved for genuine alarm rather than squirrels or delivery trucks. He stepped out the back door at 7:14 and saw two men in work clothes standing on the western side of his hedge row with a gas-powered chainsaw and loppers. Renata Collins stood at the edge of her own property, wearing her HOA lanyard and holding a folded piece of paper. She saw him emerge from the back door and did not change her expression. "Good morning," she said. "I've authorized removal of the encroaching vegetation. The board voted last night." Callum walked to the property line. He kept his voice level. "Those hedges are on my property," he said. "The pins were re-established 6 weeks ago. I have a certified survey report." "The board has a different survey," she said, and handed him the folded paper. He unfolded it. It was dated 2 weeks earlier, commissioned by the HOA, and it showed the western boundary line shifted approximately 14 inches to the east of where Bev Cratchit had placed the pins. The surveyor listed was a company called Crestline Property Services. He had never heard of them. "This contradicts the county's recorded survey," he said. "Take it up with the county," she said. "In the meantime, the encroachment is being removed." He took out his phone and called the police. He was told that a civil property dispute could not be resolved by an officer at the scene, and that if he believed a crime was being committed, he should consult an attorney and potentially seek an emergency injunction. He asked the dispatcher how long an emergency injunction took. She told him, at minimum, several hours, likely longer if a judge wasn't immediately available. The chainsaw was already running. He stood at the property line and photographed everything: the workers, the equipment, Renata standing with her arms crossed, each tree as it fell. He photographed the stumps. He photographed the condition of the ground. He documented the timestamps. He filmed a continuous video from 7:22 to 8:49, by which time 38 of his 42 arbor vitae trees had been cut to within 6 inches of the soil, their severed trunks stacked in a pile on what Renata claimed was her property and what every credible record insisted was his. The workers left. Renata went inside without another word. Callum stood in his backyard and looked at what remained. The green belt was now fully visible through the property line. Renata's kitchen window caught the morning light. Wick sat beside him and leaned against his leg. He called Milo. "They cut them down," he said. There was a pause on the line. "All of them?" Milo asked. 38 of 42. Another pause. "Callum," Milo said slowly, "what do you want to do?" Callum looked at the stumps. He looked at the exposed sky where the green wall had been. He looked at Renata's kitchen window and the glint of movement behind the glass that told him she was watching. "I want to build something she can never cut down," he said. That night, he sat at his kitchen table with the CC&Rs and read every single line again. Then he opened the city's municipal code on his laptop and read that too. He searched fence ordinances, retaining wall codes, permitted structures, and the distinction under state law between a fence and a freestanding wall. He searched case law involving property disputes and HOA overreach. He searched what the city allowed without a permit and what required one, and at what point a structure became legally exempt from Homeowners Association aesthetic guidelines. He found what he was looking for at 11:47. He wrote 4 words in his notebook, underlined them twice, and went to bed. The next morning, he called an attorney named Sasha Wren, who specialized in property rights and HOA litigation. She agreed to meet him Thursday. He called Bev Cratchit and asked her to prepare a certified boundary report suitable for court submission. He called Milo and described what he had read in the municipal code. Milo was quiet for a moment, then began to laugh. Not a mocking laugh, but the laugh of a man who recognized a genuinely elegant solution. "How many blocks?" Milo asked. "I'm thinking 4 feet high, 42 feet long," Callum said. "All the way down the property line." "That's structural," Milo said. "We'd need footings." "I know," Callum said. "That's the point." He spent Friday pulling permits. The city's building department confirmed that a freestanding masonry wall under 6 feet in height on a residential property line required a standard permit and a footings inspection, but was not subject to HOA aesthetic approval under state law, which protected the right of homeowners to install security and privacy structures regardless of community association guidelines, provided they met setback and height requirements under the municipal code. The city permit took 4 business days to process. On the morning of day 5, Callum and Milo staked the trench line. That afternoon, Renata Callum appeared at the edge of her property, saw the stakes, and stood very still for a long time. Then she walked back inside and did not come out again that day. The digging began the following morning, 14 inches deep, 14 inches wide, running the full length of the western boundary. It took 2 days. The concrete pour happened on a Thursday, supervised by the city's inspector, who signed the footings approval and handed Callum his copy without ceremony. The cinder blocks arrived Friday on a flatbed. Renata was at her property line before the delivery driver had finished lowering the pallet. She was holding her phone to her ear. "You cannot build a wall on this property line," she said. Her voice was tight and higher than usual. "The board will not approve this." "The board doesn't have authority to approve or disapprove a permitted structural wall under state law," Callum said. "Your HOA attorney can verify that. I'd suggest you call him before the board meets." There are aesthetic standards, which do not apply to structural safety walls under Municipal Code 1422, which supersedes your CC&Rs per the state's HOA reform statute passed 3 years ago. He looked at her calmly. "I've already spoken with the city attorney's office. I have it in writing." She stared at him. For the first time since he had moved to Sycamore Bend, Renata Callum did not have an immediate answer. He picked up the first cinder block. It weighed 33 pounds. He set it on the footing, checked the level, and tapped it into the mortar bed. The wall had begun. By the end of the first day, it was 2 courses high. By the end of the second day, it was 3. By Friday of the following week, it stood at its full height. 4 feet of solid, mortared, gray cinder block running the entire length of the western boundary line, anchored to a concrete footing, plumb and level, and absolutely immovable. Callum stood back and looked at it. Milo stood beside him, hands on his hips, wearing a satisfied expression. "Beautiful," Milo said. "It's functional," Callum said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Callum looked at the wall. Gray block, mortar joints sealed, surface uniform and clean. On his side, there was a 4-inch gap between the wall and his property line, necessary for maintenance access, as the permit required. On Renata's side, the wall sat exactly at the certified boundary, confirmed by Bev Cratchit's pins, which now had their own small concrete collars to prevent removal. On that same Friday, Sasha Wren filed a civil complaint in county court on Callum's behalf, naming Renata Callum, the 2 workers, and the Pinecroft Estates HOA as defendants, alleging destruction of surveyed boundary monuments, unauthorized removal of private property, and tortious interference. The complaint attached the video, the county survey report, the city permit, the engineer's drainage statement, and 17 photographs. Renata received her copy of the complaint by certified mail on Monday morning. Callum heard nothing from her for 6 days. Then the HOA's attorney sent a letter arguing the wall violated Section 6.2 of the CC&Rs, which required board approval for any structure visible from a neighboring property. Sasha Wren replied within 24 hours, citing the exact state statute and the city attorney's letter. The HOA attorney went quiet. Then the HOA filed a complaint with the city's Code Enforcement Office. Code Enforcement sent an inspector who walked the property, reviewed the permit, measured the wall, confirmed compliance, and closed the complaint the same afternoon. Then Renata filed a personal complaint with the city alleging the wall created a drainage hazard. The city sent Dorna Pask's successor, a man named Ray Tolliver, who inspected the site and signed off within 40 minutes. Each attempt failed cleanly. Each failure was documented. Callum kept every record in a 3-ring binder he labeled, simply, Western Boundary. On the 43rd day after the wall was completed, Renata Callum stood at her kitchen window and looked at nothing. because the wall was exactly 4 feet high and her kitchen window was exactly 4 feet and 2 inches from the floor, and all she could see was gray cinder block and the 2 inches of sky above it. She had started this with a chainsaw and a folded piece of paper. What she had made in return was a wall that would stand long after she was gone, but Callum was not finished. Not yet. Not by a long distance, because the wall was only the beginning of what he had planned, and what he had planned would change the entire neighborhood, not just his corner of it, in ways that Renata Callum, standing at her kitchen window and staring at Cinderblock, could not yet imagine and would not be able to stop. Part 2. The morning after the wall reached its final course, Callum drove to the county recorder's office and submitted a formal request for a title search on the western parcel, Renata Callum's property. He had a reason, a specific and legally grounded reason, which he had identified during his 11:47 reading session in the weeks prior. He had not mentioned it to Milo. He had not mentioned it to Sasha Wren yet either. He wanted to be certain before he moved. The title search took 10 days. When the results came back, Callum sat at his kitchen table and read them twice. Then he called Sasha. "I need you to look at something," he said. They met at her office the following morning. He laid the documents on her desk. She studied them for a long time without speaking. When she looked up, her expression was careful. "This is a utility easement," she said. "Granted in 1987, he confirmed. "It runs along the western boundary of both parcels, 6 feet wide, for a buried storm drain that connects to the Greenbelt drainage system. It's a city easement." "Renata's property sits partly over it," Sasha said. "The garden shed she built 3 years ago sits directly over it," Callum said. "I measured from the survey pins. The southeast corner of that shed is 11 inches inside the easement boundary." Sasha set down the documents and looked at him. "She filed a drainage complaint against you," she said. "She did," he said. "And her own shed is encroaching on a city drainage easement." "It is." "You want to file a complaint with the city?" "I want you to draft the letter," he said. "Keep it factual, no commentary." Sasha Wren drafted the letter that afternoon. It cited the easement number, the recorded dimensions, the city's maintenance access requirements, and included a certified copy of the survey overlay showing the shed's position relative to the easement boundary. She sent it to the city's Public Works Department and copied the Code Enforcement Office. The city sent a notice to Renata Callum 11 days later. The notice informed her that her accessory structure was in violation of a recorded utility easement and directed her to remove or relocate the structure within 60 days or face a daily fine of $150 per day after the deadline. Callum did not know she had received the notice until he heard the sound from his backyard. Not the violent, sudden sound of the chainsaw, but something slower and harder to categorize. A kind of low, escalating argument being conducted at high volume with someone on the phone. He could not make out the words through the wall, but he could hear the register. Tight, furious, disbelieving. He watered his garden and went inside. The civil lawsuit moved steadily forward. Sasha had served the defendants in March. The HOA's attorney had filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that any action by the board was protected under the CCNR's enforcement provisions. Sasha filed a response that was 41 pages long and contained, among other things, a certified copy of the Crestline Property Services survey used to justify the hedge removal, alongside an analysis by a licensed surveyor named Doug Pallant, who had reviewed it and found 3 material errors in the measurements, one of which shifted the boundary by exactly the amount needed to make Callum's hedges appear to encroach. The motion to dismiss was denied. Discovery began in April. In discovery, Callum's legal team requested all communications between Renata Callum and the HOA board regarding his property for the preceding 3 years. The HOA's attorney initially resisted, citing board deliberation privilege. Sasha filed a motion to compel. The court granted it. The emails arrived in a production of 412 pages. Callum and Sasha went through them over 2 evenings at her office. They found, among the routine administrative correspondence, a thread that began 14 months earlier, in which Renata had written to the other 2 board members, a retired engineer named Puck Haynes and a largely passive schoolteacher named Bet Orin, advocating for what she called a boundary correction initiative along Callum's western line. The language was carefully neutral until the 3rd email in the thread, where Renata had written, "He put those trees there specifically to block my view of the Greenbelt. I see him out there every morning and it's deliberate. I want them gone and I want it done through the board so it looks official." "That sentence," Sasha said, tapping the page. "That sentence is the case." There was also an email to Crestline Property Services, sent by Renata personally, asking whether they could produce a survey that would support the board's position. The reply from Crestline was careful but telling. We can resurvey the parcel and provide a report based on our measurements. Our methodology may differ from the county's recorded pins, which in some cases can produce variance in boundary determinations. Renata had replied, "That's what I'm looking for." Sasha looked at Callum. "Fraud," she said simply. "Can you prove intent?" he asked. "With these emails and Doug Pallant's analysis, yes." She set down the page. "I'm going to amend the complaint." The amended complaint added claims for fraud, conspiracy to deprive the plaintiff of property rights, and abuse of process. It added a demand for punitive damages. It named Renata Callum individually, not just in her capacity as board president. The HOA's attorney called Sasha the morning after the amended complaint was filed and asked whether the plaintiff was open to settlement discussions. Sasha passed the question to Callum. "What would a settlement look like?" Callum asked. "Probably a monetary offer, a cease and desist from further HOA action against your property, and a dismissal of the amended claims," Sasha said. "And the Crestline survey?" "They'd agree to have it formally withdrawn from the record." Callum thought about it for less than 10 seconds. "I want a public retraction from the board," he said, "posted in the community newsletter. I want the survey formally invalidated by the county. I want Renata to resign from the board as a condition of settlement, not just cease and desist. And I want full reimbursement for the hedges, the wall, the survey fees, and the legal costs." Sasha wrote it down.